I'm Jacqueline Brock. I have been living in Laramie for probably 6 years now, and I've been trimming professionally for almost 5 years. I started off learning from my mom, who trimmed our 4 backyard projects. And she had a lot of the learning materials and the Pete Ramey, like Jamie Jackson books, a lot of stuff like that. So I would read those for fun, and it interested me early on. But I didn't actually get into it seriously until 2018, and I did a unofficial internship with they're called ABC trimmers, and he was one of their head trimmers in California. So I did that for about 4 months. Um, and then I worked on my own horses and friends' horses, and I tooled around with it just on my own horses, just kind of learning as I went and learning hands-on. Um, and then I um, started out with the business in 2020 officially, and I've been doing it ever since. It was originally supposed to be a training venture with my sister, but once I started trimming and word got out, I didn't have time for doing anything else. I ended up getting a lot of clients pretty much right away, um, from Nell Hanley, who was in the area before I was. As a kid, I always wanted to be a vet, so I felt that getting into horse feet wasn't that far off from that. I found that I enjoyed it and I like to learn about it, and it's kind of like um, once you scratch the surface of it, you're you're opening up like a really deep hole of information. You're never gonna know everything, and that's kind of fun. Just kind of always learning more, and it's a never-ending um, feat, I guess. But it's really important to know all of the factors that play into a healthy hoof, like environment and diet. A lot of times go overlooked. So that's a lot of what I address, and it's not just feet. I like to address environment and diet as well, because it plays a huge part in how healthy their horses' feet are. And the second thing would be thrush is super common, but the issue with that is because it's so common, a lot of people overlook that too because you see it all the time. It's like whatever, but it's actually a really serious issue, and it's one of the worst, I guess, conditions that a hoof can have that will um, sort of eat away at it and deteriorate the health of the hoof really, really quickly. So it's super important to know that even though it's common, it's a really serious issue, and if you see thrush, you should be treating it. I have a lot of people that ask me about cracks or chips in their horse's feet, um, and I mean, there's a lot of other examples, but that's a really big one that comes up a lot. Um, and that always goes right back to environment and diet. So if a horse is in a really wet environment for extended periods of time, and they're not trimmed regularly and they are on a really sugary diet, provided that they're not already metabolic, and don't have laminitic issues, that will translate right into the feet, but in a completely different way. So with cracking and chipping, they first need to be trimmed regularly, and then second, their feet aren't dry. They're not cracking and chipping because their feet are dry. And this goes for donkeys, mules, minis, most breeds of horses. Hooves are made to thrive in a really dry environment, not wet environments. So when you have a really wet environment, I mean, you have thrush and abscessing and all of those other issues, but cracking and chipping comes up because the hoof gets so soft, and it actually changes the integrity of the whole hoof. So it becomes less able to stand up to outside pressures. Like if they're in a wet pen all the time and then you go for a ride in a really dry, rocky area, they're going to crack and chip. They just can't hold up. First, I would say it's important to know that your farrier is also looking for good clients. They're not just going to take anybody, especially if they are sought after, and they're busy. Definitely don't be afraid to interview them, and maybe don't grill them on what they do and how they do it, and try to correct their philosophies necessarily. But Definitely ask questions about how they view diet and environment, and um, say, like, give them examples. Say, like, your horse is abscessing. What are the first things that they would do? And kind of gauge it on, they're not just gonna slap a shoe on right away, but they actually want to solve the deeper issue. Um, you can definitely ask other people about them. Some of them can have certifications, but a lot of times it doesn't mean that much because there's a farrier school. I think in Casper, you can go for 2 weeks and you're a certified farrier, and that's all it takes. So be careful asking for certifications. It's definitely good to know, but maybe ask a little deeper about what it entailed or the schooling that they actually did. Make sure that they respect your space. Um, it's not just about whether or not you can handle their feet, but they have to be aware that you're there, and that they're not just gonna walk over you or walk into you, or um, I mean, there's all kinds of things that horses will do to get away or get out of it if it's not like a fear-driven response. They'll try anything to kind of worm their way away from you. And then beyond that, just making sure they're good with their feet. Remember that picking your horse's feet out aren't that's not always the best way to get them good with their feet, because it takes you all of maybe a minute to pick out their feet, and they might be good with that. But when a farrier has their hoof on the stand and they need the foot for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, what are they going to do in that case? Um, so spend a little longer with their feet. If you have a hoof stand, practice with a hoof stand because it makes funny noises and it looks funny. um, let's see. Yeah, make sure that they're good at moving off of pressure. If a farrier needs them to move away for whatever reason, or if something were to happen, they need to be good at moving away so that um, whatever spooking they might need to do, they can do it away from you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
so
for
much.
sure,
All
for
right.
sure.